Good morning, afternoon, evening to you all and welcome to Virtual Stampex. We are delighted to welcome David Griffiths to our auditorium today to talk to us about dragons, chaos, myths, and the exciting journey of thematic collecting. David started thematic collecting in 1990 in the theme of roses, which he exhibited in real life as well as philately, but in 1995 decided to change to dragons as he felt he could take this theme further. In 1998 he started showing dragons, and with thanks to exceptional feedback from judges, friends, and fellow exhibitors, he has developed his collection such that at London 2022, David won the Best in Class for Thematics with 96 points for his Here Be Dragons exhibit. Over to you, David.
Right. Hi. I was looking through something this morning and I found a postcard. And I'm going to show the postcard. Basically, it says, "Find the dragon." Now, this is one of these cards. When you read the rear, it says, "Why this silence? What has happened? Do let me know." Well, actually, it's appropriate to my exhibit. And if we look at the first page of the exhibit, what you will see is we talk about imagination and how chaotic imagination is. Everybody is different. Nobody's the same. And it's a sort of chaos of ideas. And that is where we're going to start with chaos. Then we'll move through to mythology, where people tell stories about dragons and legends about dragons and how it embeds itself into culture and how things like the creation myths appear, and underneath it all, you'll find a dragon. So you're looking really at how culture develops around dragons. Now, there's the modern world. Do dragons exist? Well, of course they do. Chaos is out there. Chaos is the future. And there's a lot of evidence of that, and we will look at that at the end of the exhibit. On the front page, you'll see two items, and one is an invitation to tea by Monsieur le Touriste, and it shows, and it's a Mont Michel, and if you look very carefully at the stamp or the pseudo stamp on the postal stationery, you will see St. Michael killing the dragon. He's supposed to kill the dragon there on Mont Michel, or will do. Looking at the other card, it's a New Year's greeting card from in Port Arthur, and it's from the Russian army there. And basically, this is during the Boxer period, and it's a greetings card welcoming in the new year and showing the Chinese dragon, all in gold. And then finally, we have the trouble with drink, which is Satan and the devil, the drink. And you will see again, there's a snake, which is really the devil or a dragon. So if we move on to the first slide, of which actually comes from my exhibit, you'll see that, just excuse me a second, and you'll see that what I've tried to do is to depict chaos. When I first did this page of the exhibit, I had 3 cheap items on there, and I remember phoning up a fellow philatelist who'd done rather well in the exhibiting. She got a gold medal, and I said, "Sheila, I said, I've done my first page of my exhibit. I'm not sure it's right." She said, "Oh, why is that?" "Well, I'm trying to depict chaos. And if you look at the value of the first page, it's worthless. I mean, all the items can be picked up for 50p. Said, "Oh, you can't show that." And I thought, well, yes, you can, because they show chaos. What I've tried to do is to balance the 2 colors of dragons, red and green, and to show chaos. I have smartened it up a bit and put some Shanghai stamps, which are in the corner. But basically, what you're trying to show in this exhibit is we start off with chaos, and that comes out of your imagination. So if we go on to the next sort of slide, that what we will see is how dragons change in your mind. how do we describe them? Well, we describe them as curly, ferocious, green, all sorts of colors. And what I've tried to show here are various different sort of shapes and sizes of dragons and how they appear. And you can see that it's very varied. You've got the curling type, and I've tried to show the colors: yellow, green, and we've got this ave de reception. This is one of 3 known, very rare, probably in the best condition of all of them, from Guatemala. And the reason it's shown is because the bird is a dragon bird, and we'll, you know, the Mayans and from that part of the world worshipped the Quetzal bird, and they called it a snake bird. But what we will see is the snake bird really is the same as a dragon bird, which is in the Chinese culture, and probably the origins are the same. Anyway, it's a rare piece. If we move on to the next slide, which is about reflections in the mind. Now, I've used here a postal stationery card of a man who's just before his wedding. Well, you can imagine that's chaotic. What's going to happen or befall him. And he's looking in the mirror at himself, self-respecting himself. And that's the aspect I want to get across here, is looking into your own mind. There was an artist, Victor Brunner, who did and spent his whole life depicting works on self-reflection, and they're shown on these stamps at the bottom of the page. And really, this page reflects the thoughts of the mind, and it shows dragons, which is chaotic. So the first part of my exhibits, which is the first third, is about the chaos and your imagination, and how your imagination works itself around chaos to try and create order. We'll now move into mythology and how that originated. What I'm trying to show here is that myths and storytelling and culture spreads across the world. What is remarkable is that the mythology of dragons is very similar the world over. It's remarkable that North America, as I mentioned earlier, has concept very similar to China. And they go back to the second population invasion of America. The first population was 20 or 30,000 BC, but the second or the last population was moved across, where the North Americans come from, the Red Indian or the Mayans culture came from, was from Mongolia and China. And what I'm certain is that the mythology of dragons existed then at that point in time. They had exactly the same concepts as we have today. And what I'm trying to show in the top left-hand corner is the land bridge, or as it then was, the ice bridge between Asia and America. And that's how these people infiltrated basically North America. It's very interesting that dragon myth never went further south than Panama. It only remained in North America and Central America. And a lot of it is to be found in Central America. And we were reflecting that in the postal stationery card from Mexico down below, which shows a dragon on the base of the monument there. It also appears in Iceland. I mean, we're shown Iceland up there. That's basically a plate proof from the the millennial set of the Icelandic Parliament. And then it appears in China. So we've covered most of the Northern Hemisphere there. But the most surprising places where it turns up is in Australia and New Zealand. How did it get there? The bunyip of Australia has all the characteristics of a dragon. And the Maori's Tanua has, again, all the characteristics of a dragon. And so either each culture developed them on their own in a very similar way, or ideas flowed. So that's what I'm trying to show in that sort of page, is how mythology and culture flows around the world. If we look to the second slide on this sort of thing, we're looking at how it moved through Asia. Now, more recent myths and mythology was found, well, basically, it's found in sort of the Iraq area and with the Sumerians. The first, of course, written records of dragons are basically Sumerians. And the cultures there, because that's where the first written languages are actually being picked up. And and it's evident that the mythology from Sumeria actually didn't travel in from China. It traveled in from actually Sumeria. The link between China and Sumeria is the Old Silk Road, which flows north of the Himalayas. And we find that that, curiously enough, the Icelandic and Nordic dragons often have their roots on the European extension of the Old Silk Road. But the ideas flowed, and that road has to have been used for the last 10,000 years, although it would have been a very dangerous journey to try and do it. But presumably local traders were trading with other local traders, and ideas were passed on. But the penetration into India is slightly different. It came through Afghanistan, and one of the key things that was traded along the Old Silk Road was lapis lazuli. That's blue compound, which provides the blue in paint and everything, and it's everlasting. It's brilliant. If you've seen lapis lazuli, you realize what a brilliant blue it is. It comes from Afghanistan. And I've got two native covers here from Afghanistan. These are quite interesting. They're native. They were sent to Kabul. They were sent from the English army. This is from the third Afghan campaign. I don't know whether you know, but in the first Afghan campaign, the entire British army was wiped out to a man. Only time that's happened in history, but it was wiped out to man then. And by this stage, this is 1860s, 1870s, Britain was much stronger in India and sent a full-scale army. And basically, they sieged Kabul. And these British army needed porters and people who managed the mules. Nothing like the locals. So they engaged locals. And these locals were allowed to write home back to Kabul and the surrounding areas. And this is the place they're sieging. But the post gets through, and these are sent to Peshawar, and then they're censored, and they take about 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or whatever it is, and they arrive back, but they're not censored by one person. They're censored by about 8, 10, 12 people. So you get multiple censor marks on them, because, of course, censoring a number of times protects against somebody letting something through. So they're quite interesting covers, really. And then we'll see down below is southern, the Ramayana and Indra and Vitra which again have dragon symbolism, as does the god of revenge in Nepal, which is shown in the bottom right. So we can see how it develops in more southern parts of Asia there. And the origins are almost certainly completely different from the Chinese origins, which actually moved across to the United States. If we move on to the next one, page, what I'm trying to do is to show how the mythology developed with the Greeks. And what we get here is in Sumeria and a lot of the cultures that developed on the Babylonians and various things, dragons appeared in the creation myths. Now, of course, they appear in the creation myths because, of course, it's chaotic. Nobody understands what creation was about. We appeared. So dragons get involved. And the Greeks tidied things up a bit. They created Mother Earth, and basically Mother Earth is Gaia, and Gaia is a dragon, and Gaia had most of her offspring in dragons. You have Typhon and Echidna, who are dragons, and you have Medusa and various others who are dragons, or have dragon parents. And sometimes they're depicted as dragons, but often snakes appear, like with Medusa. And if you look at the bottom of this page, or at least, sorry, the side of this page, you'll see Pegasus. Where did Pegasus appear from? Well, after Medusa's head was cut off, out sprung Pegasus. So Pegasus's parents or grandparents were dragons, winged flight, of course. And these blocks are actually from the Waterloo archives, and these are the approval plate blocks of the with the approval markings for the release of the stamps. The final one actually was never issued as a single stamp. It was because Uruguay was sympathetic to Germany during the war. The stamps weren't delivered until towards the end of the war, although they were printed much earlier, and they were overprinted for with the peace for the peace issue in Uruguay. Going back to Gaia at the top, I'm sorry, we're regressing a bit, but I've tried to show creation, and I've been criticised thematically. Although it's been withdrawn, now that people understand what I'm up to, is I'm trying to show creation and the creation of Earth and the beautiful countryside and everything else like that. And I've selected a Jersey stamp here, and it's a very, very early rough tracing of the ideas of the stamp, and I've shown that. And I've shown it's circular, so it represents, you'd think it represents the world, really. In the black, it could be Earth in its entirety. But when you see the finished stamp, it's to put the poppy in the center. But what I'm trying to do is to show creation. And just so you think that, okay, this is say a Greek idea. It isn't really. If you look at Mexico, and there is a painting there from Mexico based on the creators of the universe. And it shows a snake and a leopard. They're having a fight. And that is called creation. That's how Earth was created during that fight. And the depiction of the snake represents a dragon, very much in the same sort of way as the more westernized view of a dragon. And that is the Mexican stamp. And beside it is actually part of the plate that printed it. So one tries to, in a thematic exhibit, get into all sorts of different things which are very unusual or not expected. And I've included that very much for those two items, the tracing, which is a very early stage, and you not normally show that in an exhibit. But as I say, we're trying to create creation. And again, same thing applies to part of the plate. It's the creation of the stamp. So what you're trying to do, or I'm trying to do here, is to show creation in the stamp as well as creation on the page. What one's trying to do in thematic, I always think, is to tell a story. And the story isn't just what you see on the page. I always try and make people think about it. I've been in terrible trouble in the past with some of my exhibits. And last time I showed in the European Thematic Championships, I remember I got into the champions class, and I was runner up in the champions class, and the person who actually won is very kind, and he said, "Can you take me through your exhibit?" And I went through my exhibit with him, and he said, "It's very good." He said, "But I don't understand it." He said, "It's all bitty," and I sort of explained that it's on various levels. It's not just about dragons, it's about development of how the idea of chaos to order and mythology backing and how mythology and culture works. And he said, "I never picked that up." And I realized I'd probably done something wrong. And then one of the judges, the head judge, I had a long conversation with him again on exactly the same terms. And he absolutely pulled my exhibit apart. He sort of said, "You've got some lovely stuff," but he said, "It's all over the place. Your plan, it just falls apart. You know, you get good marks for the plan, but nobody can follow it." So I took it away, and I've given it a lot of thought. And that's why I'm breaking it down and explaining it in the way I'm explaining it to you now, is I want to get across what this is all about. It isn't just about dragons. There is a deep cultural significance in imagination and how we come to decisions and create things which just don't exist. I'm discussing it under creation because that's what it's all about. So if we move on, we're obviously still talking about mythology and culture. We're going to look here at the Chinese dragon. I've included this. There are all sorts of aspects of the Chinese dragon which I've tried to explain in the exhibit, and this is about the auspicious dragon, and the dragon is made up of 9 parts, and I show all 9 parts. And we've got here the belly of a frog, the scales of a fish, and the head of a camel, and the horns of a stag. Now, I've used the Chinese express stamps. These are the ones that would accompany the, parts. They're broken up so as you know, just like any registered or special delivery post, so as you know that you've got safe delivery and you've got a receipt for having sending. And those are showing 2 of the parts of a Chinese express stamp. They're not the same printings, but they're showing examples. And I've included them to show the belly of the frog part and the fish scale part. Underneath is this is a proof of a mulready cover. It looks much better actually in real light than in that photograph, I'm afraid. It looks a bit manky, but it does look very nice when you see it as in real life. What people don't realize about the mulready cover is it shows the British Empire from west to east. And if you look at it, you will see the world depicted round Britannia. And so you see China and various things like that. And you see Canada, and you also see things like rum and various other things. The thing that nobody ever sees behind Britannia is a reindeer pulling a sled, which isn't part of the British Empire at all, but it's up north. Anyway, so it has horns. That's where you get horns of a stag from. But I always think it's quite nice, and it shows two of the parts of the dragon. Yeah, I always like that. I like that page. This is another one about the auspicious dragon. This is a story about the stages of dragonhood. The dragon starts off as a fish and a carp, sort of, and it swims down the Yellow River, and in the end, it becomes an aga, which is sort of cobra type, snake, and then it becomes a dragon, and then eventually it becomes a dragon bird. And the dragon bird, we talked about the Quetzal as being a dragon bird, and up there is a modern example. Well, actually tells the story in 5 stamps. I tried to get a cover that told the same story, and everyone had told me it was just going to be impossible. But actually, I found one, and you've got the dragon, you've got the carp, and you've got the dragon bird. This is sent basically by a lieutenant in the German army during the Boxer Uprising back to Germany. And one of my German friends saw it and said, "Oh, it's philatelic." He sent lots of covers back. I said, "Yes, but this is not philatelic. This one sent the stamps back." If you look at the seals at the back, and actually I've windowed it partially. If you look seals back, the envelope is very thick. This was used to send sheets back to Germany. He was a philatelist, and I think it's an absolutely genuine rate, because what he sent back would have been very expensive, weighed a lot, and he would have needed to put those stamps on it. There's no reason why those would look like those would make up the rate. One can't tell whether it's precisely right, the weight, but I think it has to be. So it's actually not philatelic. It's genuine, which makes it exceptionally rare, because you would never put that amount of postage on. The real difficulty is to get even a carp and a dragon on the same envelope. I spent 20 years trying to do that, and the only person who I remember had it was Major Platt. And he had 2 covers like that, but unfortunately, when his collection was sold through Hong Kong, I never knew. Otherwise, I'd bid there. But this is better, in my view. So we'll move on to now the Christian extermination. Well, we all know about St. George, and comments have been made about this. Everyone expected, or certainly all the judges I've ever spoken to always say, "Well, I expected it all to be about St. George." Well, no, it isn't. St. George is a dragon slayer. He's actually a mercenary from the Middle East. Lived about the 5th century, probably. Collapse of the Roman Empire period. Anyway, in here I've shown some postal fiscals from Australia, Tasmania. There's on the right, you can see a block of 4 black ones, which are there's a dye proof, some unused ones, and then little studies of some of the various other ones you might find. And they all show St. George and the Dragon. They were principally revenue stamps, but they were used postally. But because they're very high value, they're sort of threepence, 2 and 6, 5 shillings, and 10 shillings. Very little postage was ever, genuine postage was ever seen from most of the high usages are forgeries. And really, the only time you're ever going to see a genuine one is if it's on a parcel, and therefore it's going to be a cutout. I've got a few which are probably okay, but I don't show them because I don't want. I would prefer to get them expertised first, I think, by the right people. And we've got here just a little bit of meter mail, which shows rather a nice St. George and the Dragon. But that sort of sums up St. George. But of course, there's somebody who's much more important, and we've already seen him, and that's St. Michael. He is the original dragon slayer in Christianity. He appears in Revelation, and he is one who basically slays the beast, number 666. So he's really he's the archangel who defeats the devil. That's of course the mythology of it, and I've shown him up there with some Zebstivos from Russia. These are Russia locals, mostly from the Moscow region or Western Russia, and we've got various examples of Zebstivos, and one used on cover. They're not that common on cover. You get some postal stationery cards as well. They're quite nice. And then we've got a postal stationery card, the Battle of Leipzig, and that's St. Michael's Gate, which was the monument that was raised. And St. Michael's there, killing the dragon again, defeating evil. May there never be a battle like Leipzig again. That was the general view, and that's why the memorial is built like that, featuring St. Michael defeating the dragon. There are many more, and my exhibit shows others, but I just wanted to show 2 examples of how Christianity turned. There is a reason why Christianity turned on dragons. Pre-Christianity, if you look, and again it's developed in the exhibit, is that a lot of Europeans pre-Christianity actually worshipped fertility and growth and vitality, and often it was depicted as a dragon. And when Christianity basically started to spread across Europe, basically they wanted to kill off the concepts of the old religion, and depicting the devil as a dragon or something that everybody fears was a way of promoting Christianity. So the devil really became synonymous with the dragon in Western culture, although it's unique to Western culture. That doesn't apply anywhere else in the world. So this part of the exhibit shows how the dragon, the concept of the original ideas of dragons, of creation and Mother Earth and old religions, were basically taken apart by Christianity, and dragons are therefore seen as ferocious, vicious, and not necessarily your friend. Now we're going to the 3rd section here, which is how one creates order out of chaos. And the idea is that where you see a dragon, often there is chaos. And basically, so this part, I start off with transmutation and change. Now, transmutation and change is about how concepts change, how things change. And one of the things that it's not part of Christianity. It's it's part of Masonic, and it came out of the Templars, from the Templars in the Middle Ages. Basically, the idea of alchemy, and the idea was to change base metals into gold, and we get also the Philosopher's Stone, which is ever-ending life, and they all go back to the creation and how it went wrong with creation, and the concept behind the transmutation of say lead into gold is that if you can banish the dragon, then, or the evilness in a metal, then it will go to its pure content, which is gold. And the patron saint of goldsmiths is St. George, and that is shown on the right, which is, sorry, on the left, which is the gold. This is a postal stationery card showing the appreciation of the goldsmiths, and so it shows St. George. And of course, it's not by chance that the sovereign bears St. George and the dragon on it, because it's pure gold, and St. George has defeated the dragon. So I've got up there on the right a Crete pair, one showing the overprint and the other not showing the overprint, and it shows the obverse of a sovereign, which is St. George and the dragon. And of course, the image from the sovereign was also used in the festival series, and I show an example of that, the stamp on the festival, but that on the left-hand side of the stamp is a cut-down die proof, the only one known in private hands, of St. George defeating the dragon. Now, this was originally in the National Postal Museum, and it was sold in, I think it was 1990. It was an auction, and the National Postal Museum sold some of their archives. And this was sold because it's cut down, damaged. But the reason it's been cut, and you can see a curve in the right-hand side, the reason it's cut is to fit the head. What they'd have done is put the die proof of the head, St. George's, George's head, alongside it. And what they've done is put it on a curve, because you much easier to fit something when you're putting it onto a curve like that. So that's been put there. And what they've done is lop off part of the die proof. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the working die proof that you use to fit the head. Don't have any problems. I don't think it's, you know, it's regarded as damaged. I'm perfectly happy about it because of its origin. But money and dragons is very much associated. I think people know all about smog and all those sort of various things. And I've used an example here of HVP postage. And this was used by banks to transport very high value items, mainly things like used banknotes, and they were put into mail vans on the railway. And this one, most of them were sent by banks to their head offices with used notes in them for destruction, because basically used notes take up a lot more room. And basically what would happen is that notes would be received by the receiving, the head office and things, taken the Bank of England, and then the whole thing would be burnt. So the actual HVP label was burnt with the banknotes. So they're not that common. And I've got an example here, 10 shillings festival paying the postage. So is proper usage of that stamp. Which brings me on to the subject of mail train robberies. I don't know whether people, those that are older, like myself, and I was actually local to the where the mail train robbers were. There was a big mail train robbery in the 60s. And basically, they were after this money that was being sent back to head offices in London. And yeah, and just so that we sort of tie the circle, really, I've got a hex envelope here, Now, this hex envelope would be used for sending money, and this is Nepal. And basically, you can see the hex, and it's been sealed, and presumably it had something like money in it. And the point was that when it had a hex on it, it had a curse on it. And the curse is if the addressee didn't open it, then the curse falls on the person who did. And who is on there? The Indra, the god of revenge. So you've got a revenge god hex on that envelope, and I just think it ties up the circle, really. Don't steal money. Anyway, so that I've included that, and this goes back to what I always try and do in my pages, and I hope I've achieved it, is you tell a story on a page. So you look at it at various different levels. You've got the stamps, you've got the various things, but underneath it, you've got an underlying story. And we're going on again on order about a chaos. Obviously, there's the childish element of dragons. We all know about, Hobbit and various other dragons, Harry Potter. They all appear in children's stories. And this is an earlier one. This is Rupert and the Dice Dragon. There's a very interesting, and this is to a certain extent, the exhibit hangs around this. Nietzsche, I don't know whether you're aware of also Zarathustra. The music was used in 2001, and basically it is a new beginning. Nietzsche wrote a story, and basically the idea is that you're up against a golden dragon, and the golden dragon says, "Thou shalt not." And the golden dragon basically represents the establishment, culture, everything. And basically what it's doing is it's imposing conformity on ideas, vitality, and various other things like that. And to defeat that, you need to think differently. So you can take the weight of the world on your shoulders and carry all the burdens of life as a camel. You can fight it and you can be as strong as a lion. But the only way you're going to walk away from that dragon free is as a child. And I've tried to show that there. And to a certain extent, this is what it's all about. It's about culture and how culture tries to put conformity on chaos. After all, people with bright ideas, people who change things, are actually rising up against conformity and culture, and they bring chaos, hence the concept of a dragon. Nietzsche was not very popular with the Catholic Church. I've shown a line here, but this is Jesuit. So now we come to the final page, which is Order Out of Chaos. Now, Here Be Dragons is a map term. And basically what they did when they had unexplored areas of the planet is they put Here Be Dragons, which meant, if you read the code really, unexplored, could be anything, just chaos. Haven't the foggiest idea, just keep clear. And we've got an example of a map where it's depicted there. And I've shown the American V-mail, and this is from the Seabees, and they show a dragon overtaking Japan. And I don't know whether you know anything about the Seabees, John Wayne and everything else like that. But the Seabees basically used to fly into an island, build a runway, and then American planes could land. And that's how the Americans moved across the Pacific. And basically the Seabees were there before anybody else, because the Japanese did not like it and got wise to it. They had to arm them. Originally, they were just engineers, but they became a unit of a battalion of the American Army, and they said they did a lot of hand depicted females, and this is one with its envelope. This one I've included shows this is almost certain sent from a gold mine. It's in South Africa back to China. A lot of the gold miners in South Africa at the turn of the century, that's the 18th, 19th century, sorry, 19th, 20th century, were Chinese, because they worked very hard, and also they were reasonably honest, and they were used for gold mining. And this is one back from one out to South Africa from somebody in China, a fairly high rate, so presumably there were enclosures, but maybe it's just the route. I haven't yet investigated yet, but just to show that there are links all around the world. And we're back to this chaos, and I've taken two images that were on right at the start of the exhibit. They formed a stamp later on in Yugoslavia, and there were two different printings, and I've shown them there, and I'm relating back right to the start of the exhibit, and I'm showing that there's chaos. And then this was shown in London in 2022, and I've shown it in Germany, in Essen, and I found a piece from Essen, and wherever I try and show it, I try and put a local bit of element on it. This is here in London, which is, there are dragons, and we get some dragons here. And then I finish off with a full stop. And basically what I've done is to take the first dragon stamp, which is Japan, SG1, and it's from plate 1, and it's position 1. And we just finished the exhibit there. End of story.
End of story. Although I think you said to me that the story never ends. It's ever evolving, this exhibition.
That is true. And that is exactly the point. This is work in progress. This is not a finished story. I don't like actually showing parts of it because it will change. It's not right, in my view. And that's the beauty of it. It's always changing, just like dragons. It's mutates and get further ideas, new material. I've got a lot of new material, and there are areas I want to develop. I'm looking at the Baal earthquake in the Middle Ages, and I want to do a page on that, because Baal has us to keep the devil away. Baal built images or a fountain to appease the dragon, the devil. And so there is a lot of symbolism in Baal about dragons and keeping the dragon at bay. The earthquake destroyed, if you didn't know, destroyed the cathedral there. And so the cathedral was rebuilt, and they didn't have the money. So various people put up the money from different religious groups in the area, Germany and France. And so Baal has this sort of it had an international aspect to it. But it produced, obviously, an early stamp. I hope to put that in, and I'm trying to find stuff that will show the earth, or can demonstrate the earthquake and the consequence appeasement of the dragon.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask about that in a second. This is 14 pages of how many in your most recent exhibit?
It basically, it's 128 pages which are that will be A4, but I do it on a A4 and a third, so it's actually 96.
Right. Just to give people an idea that what they're seeing here is just a piece of it.
And the
Sorry?
And the reason I do a page and a third is to get the bigger bits on. I don't want to go to A3 because it gets too wide. I want the thing to flow downwards as you go down the page. And I don't want it to get, it all belongs together.
Yeah.
I know that sounds silly, but it all belongs together in my view, each page, because they're part of a story on a page.
Yeah.
And I think when you start to go to A3, some people do it very well, but I think there's a danger. It's too easy to end up with it goes down and then it goes down again. And then sometimes it goes across and then across again. And sometimes it goes diagonally. And sometimes it's difficult to follow the story on a page. And I think you should have that's my own view, is you should have a story on a page. Once you have multiple pages on the same thing, I think you weaken your thematic exhibit. I mean, when you start off, you have to. Please don't get me wrong. We've all been there. It's all about learning and learning how to develop your material and having your material. This has taken me 30 years to put together now.
Yeah. Like you say, it's kind of like if you were writing a story, you would end up with too much in some chapters and have to cut some out, and other things where you're missing key things that keep the story together. So this is, as you said, it's ever evolving. There was one page that I'm just going to get back to if I can do that, which I was going to ask a question on, which was so on this page, for example, if I take just very simple, what you've got here is you've said you've got the you want the camel, you want the lion, you want the child, and those are obviously three pieces that you've chosen for that. How often are you looking for more material to improve the philatelic items that help tell your story? So let's just assume that you're going to keep this part of the story the same. Will you ever try and swap out these items, and why?
Well, obviously you're awake because you picked the weakest page I've shown, and it is one of the weakest pages in my exhibit. And it is a page that was earmarked as #1 for change next time.
Don't make me a judge yet.
So, well, this is the point. I keep on saying to people say thematics is so complicated, and it's not. Anybody can do thematics. If you can't follow the story, and you can't, you look at it and you say, oh, okay. It's obviously there's something wrong with it, and you judges just put a mark on it, but they're just what everybody else thinks. And when I showed this in London, I asked a lot of my customers, because I had a stand nearby, and I said to my customers, most of my thematic customers, I would like you to see my exhibit, and I want to know what's wrong with it. I don't want to know what's right. I want to know what's wrong with it. And one person came back and pointed out about 15 things, and every single one was correct.
Right.
And he's never exhibited before. And there were things that a judge had never seen, or didn't pick out, or anything. So, but he was right. And the whole point is there is somebody who's a layperson, and they're criticizing your exhibit constructively, not destructively, very constructively, and helping you. And so this isn't done in a vacuum. It's done with help. And so I really do appreciate your comments. And the answer is, yeah. I've changed. I've got a Jubilee. I'm going to change. I want to get it. I'm looking for a better camel item. Far better. I'm looking for a really good lion item. And I'm trying to do something on Nietzsche himself. I am not having a lot of success. I have got some better bits. Curiously enough, the child going off in the worst bit in the whole thing is that child running off.
The
and I
page.
really like it because he just screams success.
So on the idea of that you're looking for a better camel item, how much are you seeking new materials to meet the story you wish to tell versus discovering items where you think, wow, that's an amazing item, I want to adapt my story so that I can put that item into my exhibit? What's the kind of balance there for you?
I think what happens is, I mean, one of the privileges of being a dealer and a member of the PTS is you meet other dealers from all over the world. And actually, a lot of them find you things. The extraordinary thing is they find you things and they're very good. But they never pick out the second group, which is the stuff that you say, oh my God, fantastic. That I've got to have. I mean, I mean, the best cover I've got, and it isn't in here, is a cover from China, early China, and it's basically I think it's registered. Yeah, I think it's registered, and it's sent from the mouth of the Dragon River. There's a river. There's the mouth of the Dragon, and it's the river that separates China from Vietnam, and it's been sent from there. Now, it's an extremely unusual place to send a registered letter from in 1900. Extremely unusual, absolutely unique. And it's only because, I mean, it doesn't, because you read, I mean, I've learned what Chinese for dragons are, so nobody can help you. You see it and you suddenly realize that's dragon, and it's there in Chinese. It's long. So you know that you've got it. It's the mouth of the dragon. So somewhere that will go, but I haven't shown anywhere a mouth of a dragon. But they breathe fast, so I'm sure we can fit it into somewhere. And that's how it comes. And it just comes out of nowhere. But you must look. And I talk to dealers. I look all the time, and it's amazing what you find.
Yeah.
And people come up with really good ideas. That's one of the things I found when I go to talks and various things. I say, any ideas? And people come up with ideas. And most of them are really valid.
So that was one of the questions that we had when we said we were doing this talk before, was how do you stay focused and not go off onto lots of spin-off areas? I guess with your exhibit, because it's kind of about chaos, spinning off isn't the worst thing to do. But there is that, I mean, as I always say with the hobby as a whole, there's always a new path to walk down. So how do you stay focused, or are you not so bothered by that because you're more about evolving the story year after year?
Well, I have got some spin-off collections. I've got a collection of Shanghai. 70% of the stamps from Shanghai are dragons. So yeah, it's a good start. But I've got a collection of Shanghai, and some, so I also like Formosa, toe on. The early stamps there are dragons. I've got a little, you haven't seen any of those, but I've got about 5, 6 of those, and they're really nice. They ended up being used as railway tickets. Quite interesting. Then I've got a collection of. I'm into Quetzals, so I really like Quetzals. Got a Quetzal collection, and then I collect the postal history of Quetzaltenango, which is the second city in Guatemala, place of the Quetzals. So I collect postal history there. And
so you don't hold back. You keep spinning off.
Well, yeah, but they're kept in
related.
It depends on always these things is how much are you prepared to, shall I say, spend, or how serious you're going to be. Because I mean, if I go into Quetzals and I go into that seriously, you're into hundreds of thousands of pounds. And do I really want to do? I could make a fantastic early Guatemalan collection and exhibit at Guatemala. I mean, that's a possibility. I could try and put together, I shouldn't think there'll be enough, of Tasmania postal fiscals. Don't think there'd be enough material there. I could do something on Shanghai, but then Shanghai was never really a good, there's very little used material. So, and covers are tremendously rare.
Yeah.
So you're sort of, the way of developing it forward is probably limited, and that's why I'm quite happy to sort of tread the path I'm doing, because I think they're self-limiting.
Yeah.
The reason I chose this subject of dragons, was because I realized right from the word go, it's not limited. It's actually, you can take it where you want to take it to a certain extent. And somebody said to me, do you invent all this? And the answer is no. I started off, I think I bought 100 books on dragons before I even bought anything.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand all about dragons, because you can't do a thematic exhibit unless you understand what you're trying to show to people. I get, I'm a thematic dealer, and I get quite disappointed when people come up with a really good theme and then you sort of talk to them about it and you realize that they're only skating the surface.
Yeah.
I
think there's so much of it in any hobby, really, is you've got to enjoy learning about the subject. Which so in that vein, though, I mean, how, if someone was thinking about, I really love X subject and I'd love to start building a thematic collection around it, how important do you think it is that theme is unique?
Well, I think I first of all, I would say that 60%, 70% of thematic collecting is loving the subject you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you like horses, if you really love horses, then, and you know a lot about horses and you're prepared to do a lot of reading and understanding about it's not just the, shall I say, pictures of horses. It's the evolution of horses, how they've been used by human beings, and then you've got a story to tell.
Yeah.
And this is the point. It's so personal. It's part of you. I mean, it's, as time goes on, you want to say to people, this is what I want to show you about my subject of horses or my subject of castles or something like this. Now, I would hope that they wouldn't be just showing you every castle in, say, the UK or every horse breed that exists around the world. They're showing something much, much, much deeper, and something they're really interested in. And more significantly, when you look at it, you think, oh, yes. And you begin to get inside their mind and they're getting across their ideas. So every thematic exhibit, in my view, and all thematics, really it's personal.
Yeah.
It's part, and so you can't. You're not when you look at somebody's exhibit and you don't understand it or anything, then that's okay if they're just showing it you and whatever various things. But actually, if they really want to say exhibit it, then they should want other people to enjoy and look at their exhibit and say, oh yes, oh I didn't know that, or that gives me an idea, or oh that's an interesting piece. There's always something of interest.
Yeah. And that is about kind of showing off, isn't it? Is, you know, if anyone listening here is able to go to a stamp exhibition and browse these frames, or go into the Display Your Way hall here at Virtual Stampex, there are people who do provide you know, pages of their exhibits on social media and things to help share knowledge, get ideas back, get the feedback back, which is very important. You know, you mentioned, I think there was a page on Gaia where you said that you'd been, what was the word, criticized thematically for that. How does that feel? Like, what do you think are the kind of, like, because you say it's so personal, isn't it? And you're obviously passionate about telling the story. You know, I guess you have to be ready for that criticism if you're going to move forward in the exhibiting world.
Well, right. The very first time I exhibited, I was asked to sort of not. There was a thing called Eurothema, and I did. First of all, I started at the National at Stampex back. That was my first exhibit, and then it did quite well there. And then I was asked to do Eurothema, where a European team of 3 exhibitors from each country in Europe were asked to compete. So you got 3 exhibitors, and they would be marked. They weren't allowed to be gold medal exhibits. They had to be vermeil or below. And you would be invited to go to, say, Belgium or Germany or anywhere in Europe. I think I did France, Germany, and there was one in the UK. Did 2 in Belgium, Belgium. And then you were invited, and then each of your exhibits was marked, and then they were added together, and the highest number basically won the championship. And then there would be probably 10 countries, 12 countries competing in Europe. And so I did that a couple of times. And then one of the German judges at these things said, would you like to show at the German National? So I said, well, I don't speak German. I can't write it in German. He said, no, that won't matter. He said, you put it into the thematic section in the German National Show. He said, we're trying to develop a European competition in Essen. So I did that, and I exhibited. And I remember 3 German judges descending on me because I had included a cover with a signature on it, which is, strictly speaking, a no-no in thematics. Now, I knew that, and I did basically, and I haven't done the Welsh Dragon, but the first flight by Air Wales was in a Chieftain aircraft, and it only carried, I think, 12 envelopes or something like that. It wasn't a very serious sort of, you know, it wasn't regarded as a serious philatelic flight. And each of these covers that were carried on this flight had a signature on them. And I'd included it because the thing for chieftain in Welsh is dragon. I mean, that it's synonymous with chieftain aircraft. So, because you get Pendragon, chieftain, or chieftain's representative, and so somebody being quite shrewd when, you know, I thought, oh, that's okay. And then you've got the Welsh stamp, which has got a dragon on it and everything else like that. And I thought, well, it's interesting. First flight, chieftain aircraft, and what I'm making is connection between Pendragon and basically chieftain, and I included it for that reason. And of course, they descended on me. Three German judges, you know, and they said, no, you shouldn't have shown this. And I explained that. I said, oh, okay. I said, there's no other way of showing it. And of course, there isn't. You know, it's a good way of showing it. And the point is, in thematics, you are allowed, if there's no other way, to use material that is, strictly speaking, pretty dubious.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't really be downmarked for it. And yeah, so it sort of hurt, but I managed to keep it in my exhibit for the next 5 or 6 times I displayed. It's dropped now because I've got better stuff and I don't do it that way.
Yeah.
But yes, it does hurt. But I think you, I mean, in the end, if you think it should be in there and you've got a reason for showing it, what you've got to do is you've got to explain yourself and say why you're doing it and what it's trying to represent. And I was criticized about it, but then when I spoke to the person about it, who is a judge, he said, well, it's how you describe it. And that's very true. You haven't got the message across.
Yeah, good advice. That's why it's important, isn't it, to always share and show your display as much as you can and get the feedback.
It's so important. It's how it comes across to other people. I mean, I think I've always thought that exhibiting, I used to grow, exhibit flowers before I started on stamps. And the whole point is people come to shows and they want to look at it because they're interested, and you have a responsibility to try and make their time enjoyable, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've got time for a couple of questions. One of my questions is, are there, to that point, which is you want people to enjoy the story you're telling them, are there any places that you feel you could display this exhibit outside of philately? And if so, have you done that?
I haven't. I was asked by my next door neighbour to do it to the Women's Institute.
Yeah.
Sure. But it never came to anything. I said I would do it, but no, because I'm quite happy to, because as you probably realised, I spend most of my time talking the story, not the stamps.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I wonder if there's like a myths and legends society or something who would find it all absolutely fascinating.
So yes, of course, and because I think that's why I go back to this business. 70% is this story. It's and as you, when you start, it's so difficult. You've not got the material.
Yeah.
And it takes years. I don't want to put people off, but it does take a long time to get your material. But you've got to. You start somewhere. You can do it in 6 months. You can start somewhere, and don't. I would never criticize somebody who's started off, and and it's obviously very basic.
Yeah.
But and they should always be receptive to criticism. But one of the things that is said, a lot of thematic people have said, is they go and ask a judge, and I'm not being critical of judges because I think it's a very difficult job. They ask judges, what can I do better? And the judge makes some vague comment like, I couldn't follow it. That doesn't really help. You need more to discuss the areas, and that takes time. And judges, your exhibit is probably judged in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it has to look good.
Yeah.
So that's quite important. Another thing you do is you make it. You see pages, but actually you're going to see frames. And the first thing you see when you look at an exhibit is the frames, and all 7 or 8 frames, 5 frames, whatever it is, need to look in a thematic exhibit similar. Because if they don't, if there's a white area, there's a lack of material. And
we actually have a round table later in the show on some of those practical tips on creating the exhibit, styling and types of software to use, or how to, what formats to have to that point, with thematics in mind, for people to be able to kind of get a bit of a cheat sheet on some of that?
What you need, I do mine on a template. I mean, I've got a template written up so that if I do a page from afresh, it's already arranged. Obviously, the piece is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
But what it does is it makes sure that the page is properly used. What you try to do is to get, to a certain extent, the heavier items, the bigger items, towards the bottom. But what you want is the whole page to blend in with the next page and the next page and the next page.
Yeah.
So that needs a bit of thought. And actually, when you finish, what you need to do is to lay each page out on the floor and look at it and say, oh, that's okay. But if you start making it look different, then it's immediately going to, anybody viewing sees it straight away and then say, why?
Yeah, that's interesting. So what, there's two questions actually still. What do you think organized philately, so organizations like the FIP, FIPA, societies, shows like Stampex, could do to encourage more collectors to step into actually exhibiting, like actually putting the exhibit together? And I guess related to that, what would your advice be to the collectors who have never exhibited before? They've never started to piece together their story. What would your advice be to get them started?
Well, I think the most important thing to understand about any form of collecting is, and I'm very serious about this aspect, is your collection an accumulation or is it a collection? Simple question. 99 times out of 10, people's collections are accumulations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're not. Yeah. They're not. If you're tick boxing, I've got SG1 through to SG 1000. Is it really? It's a collection. Yes, you've got everything. But what have you done? You've just ticked a whole load of boxes. You filled in the holes. That's your achievement. I think it's very straightforward, isn't it? Is that going to be interesting to someone? Well, yes, if they're in really nice condition, but it's limiting. Something that's interesting where you have never seen that before, or I didn't know that could be used like that. So people tend to go to things like postal history, various other things like that, which add a dimension of interest onto them.
Yeah.
And I think the great thing about exhibiting is your exhibit becomes your collection, doesn't it?
Mm.
That is my collection, not what sits in the box. That's my accumulation.
Yeah.
And so when you true collect, in my view, it promotes you to collect in your way, and it's your choice. It doesn't matter if you're collecting a country, it's your choice how you collect it. You can collect it in blocks of 4 if you want. That's your choice. But at least it's going to be different to somebody's, because some of that stuff is going to be incredibly rare.
Yeah.
So, and I think when you, I don't know whether you ever watch things like Bargain Hunt and things like this, but they show people who are avid collectors of Star Wars or Star Wars, I think, was one quite recently. And I had no idea. And the guy's collected it, and he's collected the same Starship Troopers from every single country in the world in their packets. Well, yes, but how does he know that? How did he find out? How did he get hold of this? The mind boggles. And actually, it's so interesting from an outsider's point of view. I don't collect Star Wars. I think you're mad. But actually, when you get him and you see his collection, you realize he's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, he's built a man cave full of these Star Wars characters.
That's
And
like
if you
if
want a
all of our
full-size
stamp
Darth Vader, there he's got it. And I think it's about his enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And he's not setting out to exhibit it. It's his own. Somehow the BBC's found out he's got it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our display your way concept. So in the display your way hall at virtual Stampex, and we have touchscreens at physical Stampex, is to allow people to display however they want to display. No FIP rules, just give it a go. One pagers, not even, you know, like you say, an A4.5, or, you know, however you, wherever you are in your journey. So you said earlier, it might take 6 months to start getting that collection or getting that story ready and turning your accumulation into a collection. In 6 months' time, that's pushing us into physical Stampex. You could display your way there and get the feedback from people, test it out, practice the process, and because do it in a way that you want to do it, as a starting point. And of course, maybe later you decide to exhibit more formally within the structures, or maybe some of the structures will start to adapt. We're seeing more and more virtual exhibiting. Although you did have one, the mall ready cover, you said in real life, it looks a bit mucky on the scan, but in real life, it's amazing. There's an example of how seeing an exhibit in person can be different from seeing it on the screen in some cases.
Yeah, and I think actually the other thing is, I mean, I think I told you, I never want people to look at my exhibit and say, can I have a complete copy of it? Because I think all they're doing is the copying. I'm doing it my way. It's work in progress. Those pages are going to change. I'm not happy with them. I wouldn't want them to be used as a model.
Yeah.
But when you go to an exhibit, and no, I think no exhibitor minds this, and this is a very borderline area. People go around with mobile phones photographing pages.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no problem with that. And I think it's really interesting that people take a cover and they photograph it. Yeah. Now, you might argue all sorts of things against it, but actually it's interesting to them. And I have taken photographs of various little things which I think real interest to me.
And it might be something that's inspiring. They might see something in your exhibit and think, oh, I've now worked out what I can do in my exhibit to improve that page. I'll take a photo to remind myself of what this exhibit has done. That's why I think, again, we're trying to get display your way onto the internet, accessible through touchscreens at the shows, because we want to inspire as many people as possible to see content, even if it's not the whole exhibit. There'll be something inspiring in there. I mean, you've just shown 14 pages of 96, and there's a huge amount of inspiration across that content and your storytelling.
Yeah, and you're not. The other thing is, I think people don't realize is that when you get into the exhibition arena, is you're not just talking to somebody in the UK.
Yeah,
you're talking to people all over the world.
Yeah,
and the one thing that I always feel is fascinating is the mail gets through. I mean, it's astonishing what gets through. I love countries like Colombia, and my exhibit's got a cover which is returned to sender in Mexico, and it's sent to this senorita to be collected at a hotel. It's been intercepted by the government, so it's been censored. So the contents has been read. The envelope has been opened around the seal, not. The question is why. And when you look at it, you realize that this has been sent to a hotel, been intercepted by the government. Then it's been sent at the start of a revolution to a town that joined the revolution about 7 days, 8 days after this letter was received. And it's a return to sender. And you think, that's interesting. And then you realize it wasn't driven to a home address. could be collected at a hotel. Well, presumably Senorita, whatever her name, never turned up at the hotel because she was warned not to, because there was somebody watching.
Yeah.
Because there'd be a government, it was still in a sort of government area, so somebody would be watching. I mean, I assume that's why. So, of course, the letter was never delivered. It was probably passed on verbally, because 8 days later, the town joined the revolution. And the other interesting thing about that town is it produced a female army under a female general.
Oh.
And it was an active unit in the war. It actually captured another town in military terms.
Wow.
So you sort of, well, we don't know whether it's all connected, but you could see that what
your imagination gets going.
Your imagination
kind of
is
fill the gaps with facts and things that you actually can see, but other than that, you're creating the story.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point, and it getting into it, and when you start to, I mean, this is the joys of postal history, of course. I mean, this is why people do postal history, but I think the whole thing is connected. It's thematics connects the whole lot.
Yeah.
And and if you have interests which are outside philately, I mean, my first thing was fruit roses, and we've had some discussion about my obsession with horticulture.
Yeah.
You know,
we haven't got time for that now. We're gonna have to close up in a bit. You and I could talk all day, every day about all this stuff. So,
but that's the point. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. You're showing, but you are showing part of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably a big argument for doing thematics on social media, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we should
We're all like
start a social media.
We've all kind of cut around
thematics competition.
Right. Well, I honestly thank you so much for your time, David. We're going to cut it here because we need to move on to the next talk. But thank you so much for your presentation, your just inspiring us, your storytelling, your ideas. And we know you will be at Stampex in London in October. So if anyone's watching this and fancies coming to the show and seeing some beautiful thematic items, but also chatting to David, I'm sure that you would welcome some visitors to your stand.
I'm always, when I do fairs, shows, Stampex kind of thing, if people want to have a chat about things, always happy. That's one of the most important things I think about being a dealer, is actually you have some, I won't say much knowledge, but you have a little knowledge, and actually you can help an awful lot of people collect and focus where they collect.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. If dealers forget the collectors, then they've got a serious problem. Yeah. I look forward to all fairs I do.
Yeah, connecting people, connecting items, connecting the stories. And like you say, something 20 years time, you think that I've seen something that someone had talked about 20 years ago, or it would suit that exhibition. You just, it's about, that's where the network's really important.
I've been helped a tremendous amount by people all over the world.
Yeah.
And not just this guy, Germany. I may have sounded knock a bit. No, the German people, German judges and things cannot be more helpful. I mean, some of the people from Europe, magnificent.
Fantastic.
And I wouldn't have ever got to know them if I'd never exhibited.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, there's the story. That's what we've asked you to do, is to try and inspire some people to think about building a thematic exhibit. So I hope that we'll see some conversations in the collectors lounge, ask for advice, go around the dealers, speak to people, have a look in the Display Your Way hall, and hope that we can continue this conversation, that we have some people come later in the year that say that they've put a display in because they were inspired by some dragons. So thank you very, very much, David. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close off?
No, just thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.